In 2014, I listened to a podcast that changed my life. The podcast was between Tim Ferriss and Dom D'Agostino, and they were talking about something that was very interesting to me. It was a podcast about how to heal brains and what did the science say about some of the new and innovative ways to decrease the time a brain injury took to repair. The podcast was pretty status quo for the things I was doing in my clinic, except for one, and that was that these patients were in a state of ketosis. I literally had to go look that up because the only word with keto in my mind was ketoacidosis, a dangerous thing that my type 1 diabetics would end up when their insulin stopped working. Let me set the stage. In 2014, you can say this might have been the most stressful season of my life. I was a young mother of 3 kids, having a full practice in medicine, and I was enduring one of the biggest setbacks that I've ever had. The stress kept me sleeping poorly, worrying all the time, and I had risen to the heaviest weight of my life, even including pregnancy. By the end of the podcast, it was very clear to me that my patients needed to be in this state if they wanted the fastest brain repair, and that I should probably try to do that if I wanted some of this weight to come off. So I'd Googled a few things, looked up a couple of papers, and thought, easy peasy. I lowered the carbohydrates and had these ketone strips that should turn purple when there's excess ketones in your body and you pee them out. I think I went through 2 jars of them, never once peeing purple on the stick. Clearly, I was making a mistake, but I'm pretty stubborn and maybe a little arrogant and said, I'm sure it's just not working for me because the strips are bad. It couldn't be that I didn't know how to count carbohydrates correctly, could it? I taught patients how to count carbohydrates to give them insulin to treat their diabetes. But the truth came out on Memorial Day. On Memorial Day, a tradition in our city was to take a ruck pack and march around the city 20 miles in the name of the mental health struggles from our troops. I joined this tradition for the first year and had 3 kids in tow. And at about 15 miles, I said, if I don't pee a ketone like this, it must be junk science. Of course, it couldn't be that I was doing anything wrong. At the end of the hike, with blisters on my feet and a sweat-drenched ruck pack, I peed my first ketone. I was then determined not to eat a bite because I wasn't sure that what I was doing would continue my journey in a state of ketosis. Now, since then, I've learned a lot. So why was it so difficult for me to pee a ketone when all these other fit people were doing it easily? For starters, that chemistry set in my body was on a bed of high cortisol. Cortisol is that hormone that rises when we don't sleep, when stress is high, and when our body is in a season of putting on a bunch of weight. All true in my case. That high cortisol mandates an insulin level that grows higher and higher week after week, otherwise called insulin resistance when you've been doing that for months on end. By the time I tried to pee a ketone, I'd been putting on weight for at least 12 consecutive months, and it wasn't a little bit of weight. The second thing I really screwed up on was, that arrogance that I thought I knew where all the carbs were. I read labels and thought, that's enough, right? I wasn't using a tool like Chronometer, which was an accurate reflection of what I was actually eating. And that's where I found my carbohydrates were well north of 60 grams a day, not enough to lower the insulin in somebody with high cortisol and insulin resistance for the last couple of years. This whole experience changed my approach when I'm helping someone learn how to pee a ketone. For starters, it isn't an assumption that you know the carbohydrates that are in your diet. You must check. What we do in the absence of documenting will sneak in, and it is just too easy to add up the carbohydrates without thinking. The second absolute rule is, had I not been measuring my ketones, I would have thought that I was in ketosis. You are not on the ketogenic diet if you do not have ketones in circulation, at least at 0.5 millimoles per liter in your blood. You can pee on a ketone strip, or you can check those ketones with a drip of blood. Either way, the key is to measure to know what's your body chemistry doing when you're changing the diet to get the benefits of the ketogenic diet. After that 20-mile ruck hike that got me into ketosis, I did eventually have to eat again. So how was I going to find a way to eat while staying in a state of ketosis? And as I was struggling through that, 3 weeks later, I got horrible news about my mom. What happened to my mom took this lesson to a matter of life or death. Check out this next video to hear what happened to her.